Hello everybody, good afternoon and welcome to the balcony here at First Presbyterian Church in Evansville, Indiana for our Thursday noon live stream of music. Today I'm going to be playing on our Fisk pipe organ and I'm going to try and play some, hopefully you'll hear some sounds or in combinations which you might not have heard today before. And today I'm going to start with 4 of J.S. Bach's inventions. Bach understood the word invention to mean a creative process by which you have some material to begin with, and then you develop it. You invent it. You play with it. You develop it, and sort of see musically where it takes you. The inventions are in 2 parts, and they all start with a melody being introduced and then a second completely independent line which is very closely related or often absolutely identical to the first line. Bach used these as the basis for teaching the keyboard, the clavier, the harpsichord, or whatever you happen to have around, and but I'm going to play these on the organ. When I first moved to Evansville during my gap year, I didn't have a very large repertoire, and I played at a local church here in town for a year, and one of the ways that I eked out my meagre organ repertoire was to learn a new invention every week, which was now 29 years ago, and actually a lot of these pieces I maybe have never played since. But what Bach said in his introduction in 1723 to a reprinting of the book is, he said, "A proper introduction whereby lovers of the clavier, and especially those with a thirst for true knowledge, are shown a clear way, not only, 1, of learning to play cleanly in 2 voices, but 2, also with further progress to proceed with 3 obligato parts correctly and well, at the same time not only receiving good ideas, in other words inventions, but also utilizing them for the development of a cantabile style of playing and for the procurement of a thorough foretaste of composition completed by Johann Sebastian Bach, who at that time was an Anhalt-Kirchischen Kapellmeister in 1723. So the first part is 15 inventions in 2 parts, followed by 15 sinfonias in 3 parts. So there's a little preface. I'm going to play the first 4 of these, and I'm just going to say a little word about each one before I play it. I think that the first invention is the very first piece of Bach I ever played. I was probably my son's age, about 11 or 12. And I used to drive my parents absolutely nuts by playing the first phrase in C major, and then when the left hand came in, I would play that in a different key, normally in B or D flat or something. Must have driven them absolutely bonkers. But I'm going to play both hands in C major today, and I'm going to use the cornet sound, which has an 8-foot, a 4-foot, a 2-foot, a 2 and a 2/3, and a 1 3/5. Normally when we have our cornet on this instrument, it's all over in the swell, but today I'm actually going to use the 8 and 4-foot flutes from the grate. The 8-foot here is the Spire flute, and while it is tapered, it's an open flute, and it's just got a slightly different sound, and I thought it might, and as I only need 1 keyboard, I can couple them both and use them for invention number 1. In C major. features of our Fisk organ is that it has flexible winding. And you may have noticed there that while I held a high note in the right hand, but the left hand was busy, that the sound of the high note seemed to move or vibrate at the same speed as the lower notes. And that's because as the wind moves through the system of the organ, it sends little shock waves back through to pipes which are already playing. Now in many modern instruments, most modern instruments, that's all ironed out, so we can get a totally a smooth sound on every note, and a pipe which is playing will not change whatever is going on around it. But we have here a wind stabilizer, and I would engage this for music after the era of Bach, or sometimes on very big pieces, so that the wind isn't too flexible when we've really got a lot of organ going. But the wind stabilizer will be staying off today. Now the invention in C minor, I'm going to use the bass clarinet played up an octave for the left hand, and in the right hand I'm going to use the swell oboe. These are our two contrasting colour reed stops. There's also two 8-foot trumpets on each manual, a German trumpet on the great and the famous French trumpet in the swell. So these are our contrasting and very colourful reed sounds. This particular invention has a rather odd moment where you have to play a trill in the left hand on a note which is already in use in the right hand. And a number of people have written, well, how are you going to play that? Well, I'm going to get around that by using two different keyboards with two different sounds. So, melancholy Bach there. Now moving into D major, we enter a far brighter spirit. And here, for the accompaniment in the left hand, I'm going to use the main 8-foot principal from the grate, the 4-foot chimney flute in the left hand accompanying, and on the right hand, a mixture of sounds. The violin diapason, and the 4-foot Italian principal, and the 2 2/3 Nazard, which is a very wide open flute. And finally, from the two-part inventions, number 4 in D minor, played on the swell chorus, 8, 4, and 2-foot principals. And now we will move on to the second section of our recital today, which is a chorale partita, BWV 766 by J.S. Bach. It's on an evening hymn, Christ der du bist der helle Tag. The piece is in F minor, which even in Fisk 1, the temperament of our Fisk organ here has a lot of character. You'll notice, if you're eagle-eared, that F major in Fisk 1 is almost pure. There's very little beating inside the chords. A lot of the intervals are true. And in the past, I've also played you a chord of F sharp major. And you can tell that there's quite a lot of tension in there. Closely rated to F minor is its relative major, A flat major. And there's quite a lot of this piece which is in A flat major, because at the end of the first phrase, that's where the melody goes, leads us to a chord of A flat major. And in Bach's day, that would have been really, really pungent. Much more sort of out of tune sounding than it is here. Would have made you wince just a little bit. But the relief then that comes with the pure tuned chords in the temperaments provides immense relief from those moments of tension. So the melody itself is quite interesting in that the fourth phrase opens with 4 repeated notes, 4 repeated Cs. And Bach, during the course of this piece, makes quite a play of that, often using it as a sequence to take him to other keys. So he'll do it in F minor, and then he'll repeat the note, but in F major, and then again in G major, and then back to F. What I'm going to do is just introduce each movement of the partita and just say a little bit about what's going on. But I will start by playing the melody, and then playing Bach's harmonization of it to get us started. So here is the partita, chorale partita on Christ der du bist der helle Tag. The translation of the first verse, which is the chorale, is, "Night is not able to stay before you, Christ, you who are the brightest day. You enlighten us from the Father, and are the preacher of the light, and are the preacher of the light." So another thing you can tell there is that the text repeats for the last 2 phrases, even though the notes are different. So the first verse is marked largo, or rather I should say the second verse, the first variation. And it's a fairly long movement. The melody is going to be played on our most vocal stop, the 8-foot principal, on the great, and it's going to be accompanied by a single stop in the swell, the 8-foot violin diapason, which is one of our main go-to accompaniment stops, but which is also very, very clear. The translation says, "O dear Lord, guard us from the wicked foe. Let us rest well in you, so that we are safe from the devil." So that we are safe from the devil. And you'll hear there's a lot of chromatic yearning and moving around, notes very, very close to each other, and it's got a very, very beautiful flow to it. And also you'll notice right off the bat that Bach begins to explore what he can do with those repeated notes at the beginning of the 4th phrase. third part has the following translation. If the eyes are falling asleep, let the heart be awake. Hold your right hand over us, so that we do not fall into sin or disgrace. Which is repeated, so that we do not fall into sin or disgrace. I feel that here Bach is definitely wanting us to feel the heart being awake, and there's quite a sort of chirpy little accompaniment part, which comes after each phrase. One thing you'll notice is that we're beginning to get more elaboration of the melody, and sometimes it's hidden a little bit, and sometimes it sits on top. And this is rather like one of the inventions, the 14th invention in B flat major. Well, you'll hear this idea that gets thrown around. Bach was masterful at putting little motivic ideas all through the texture of the music. So here we are, verse 3, and I'm going to play it on the swell division with the 8-foot and the chirpy bright 2-foot principle. Verse 4 has a new texture again. In this verse, the melody itself is not explicitly stated as long notes, but is hidden in lots and lots of figuration. We ask you, Lord Jesus Christ, to guard us from the treachery of the devil, who is always striving for our souls, so that he has no power over us, so that the devil has no power over us. And for this beautiful texture, I'm going to use as a solo, single stop, the 8-foot spire flute on the grate. The 5th verse. We indeed are your inherited possession, gained by your precious blood. This was the eternal Father's counsel when he gave us to you, when he gave us to you. The texture here is very, very interesting. The melody is often in the thumb of the left hand, so it's kind of in the tenor part, and I'm playing it on the clearest, pretty much the clearest stop we have, the 8-foot violin diapason, which earlier was an accompanimental stop, but now is solo and able certainly to hold its own. Notice that when there are just two voices going, that's the breath between the different phrases. So we get going at the beginning, it's 3 parts, occasionally 4, and then when the phrase ends, it'll go down to 2 and sort of move around a little bit, and then the melody will come back in those longer note values hidden in the middle there. This is one of maybe symbolic of heaven and hell and earth in the middle, and Jesus coming to us by his, into the middle of the texture, into earth. Verse 5. Verse 6. Command your angel to come and guard us, your property. Give the dear watchers to us, so that we might have peace from Satan. In many recordings, you'll hear this played on a fairly robust sound, but I'm going to play it on a single stop. For some visiting organists, this is their favourite stop of all, the 4-foot chimney flute on the grate. Now, you will have noticed in the previous variation that he played a lot around with octaves, so all of a sudden what was going on down there is now in the middle and is now higher up. There's way more of that going on here. Again, when the melody is being presented, even though it's dressed up quite a little bit, there are more parts, and then at the ends of the phrases, there are fewer parts that kind of, in some cases, drift away or are arpeggiated. And our final variation. We sleep in your name while the angels are present with us. We praise you eternally, Holy Trinity. We praise you eternally, Holy Trinity. So perhaps representing sleeping, laying down, going down to bed. The melody is in the bass now, and I'm going to highlight that. There's actually a sort of additional pedal part here, using the pedal 16-foot trombone and a mild chorus of 8, 4, 2, and the 12th in the great. This, you may have noticed, is mostly for manuals only, and you actually don't have to have the pedal part. It's a really, really wonderful piece for displaying the qualities and sounds of a small organ, and I've actually played it on an instrument the size of our Brunswick, which has only 4 stops, but it's amazing how the combinations can add up. It also sounds very beautiful on the 7-stop Giesecke organ, so maybe if the repertoire comes around again, I'll play it downstairs on those instruments. But again, thanks for listening today, and here comes the final variation of our partita. Thanks again for joining me. Have a wonderful Thursday and a terrific weekend.